Hi, I'm Kevin Hatley and welcome to Kevin Hatley Photography. What I want to do in this video is share with you my experiences of how to set up a bird feeder station in a wood, and what I'll do is I'll share with you my top 5 tips. These are based on the experiences I learnt from last year when I set up a bird feeder station in a wood, and I made a video of that, and I'll leave a link to that at the end so that you can watch that as well. The fact is that in the UK lots of people like to turn their attention in the winter to feeding birds, and there's lots of feeder stations around and about, certainly in the area that I live in. However, what I tend to find is that those feeder stations, which have got a lot of public access, tend to get damaged, vandalised, and a lot of fly tipping, people dumping stuff next to it. So in the ideal world, the best place for a bird feeder station to be set up is in a private wood, and that's what I've done here. I approached a local landowner, and with their kind permission, I've set up a bird feeder station for the winter of 21-22. And what I'll do is I'll walk you through the site, and I'll explain to you what the 5 tips are as I go, and hopefully it will lead to getting images like this. Okay, so let's get into the tips then. So tip number 5 is reconnaissance, or recce for short. Back in my old army days, we had a good saying that time spent in reconnaissance was seldom wasted. Don't expect just to turn up in any old wood, put feeders out, put posts out, and expect that the jays are going to land there, the woodpeckers are going to come down here, the nuthatches will be over there. It just doesn't happen like that. You have to carry out a good little recce just to make sure that the spot that you've picked is suitable for the species that you're looking to attract to your feeder station. What I've done this year is, I have 2 target species. That's the woodpecker and the jay. So I wasn't expecting them just to turn up anywhere. I had to go out onto the ground to try and find out where the jays were, where the woodpeckers were as well, and that's what I did. As I said, I've got access to some private woods on private land, so I spent a little bit of time looking and watching, and I knew there was jays about, and I knew there were woodpeckers about, and I found them in a particular spot in the wood, and that's this spot here. And what we'll do is we'll just have a quick walk around, just so that I can show you the site that I've picked. So the idea being is that once you've chosen a likely spot, just get some feeders, put them out. You don't necessarily have to put them out on a feeder station like this. You can just hang them from branches. Again, think about the target species that you may be after. If you're after everything and anything, then you need to put out a mix of food for the birds. As I said, I'm looking for jays and I'm looking for woodpeckers, so the idea being that you attract the small birds in, and that should bring the larger birds in later on. So put some feeders out, give it some time, and just take your time and watch to see how the birds come in onto the feeders. Okay, tip number 4 is location. There are specific things you need to look for with regards to the location that you're going to pick, and the most important thing is cover. Now, cover comes, I would grade it in 3 levels: low cover, medium cover, and high cover. And what I'll do is I'll explain that to you now. Now, what we're looking at here is low bramble bushes. I would call this low cover, and this is where the small birds will come in so that they feel safe from attack from birds of prey, things like sparrowhawks. And what they'll do is sit in this low cover, and then they'll come out onto the feeders when they feel safe, and then go back into the low cover. When we're talking about medium cover, we're then looking at things like taller hedgerows and bushes, again, which will provide cover for the birds before they come into the feeder station. High cover is basically up in the trees. Now, if you look at these trees here, which are right above the feeder station itself, what will happen is that my target species, the woodpeckers and the jays, will come in to those trees on the periphery, and then they'll slowly move their way inwards, move their way down, and then when they feel safe, they'll come down onto the posts and on the perches to feed. So when you're looking at location, you're looking for low cover, medium cover and high cover. And then finally you want a piece of open ground where you can set up your posts and your feeders to bring the birds down onto, that will give you an opportunity to photograph them from your hide. Okay, tip number 3 is direction. And when we're talking about direction, what we're talking about is, here in the UK we sit in the northern hemisphere, which basically means that the sun rises in the east and then it sets in the west. Ideally you want to have your hide location facing north, so that the sun, when it rises in the morning, goes from east to west behind you, so that you've got the light shining down onto the actual feeder station itself, and gives you the best opportunity to use the maximum light that's available. The thing is that in the winter here in the UK, you're lucky. I mean, today's a nice bright day. Sunrise was about 8:15 this morning. Sunset will be about 3:45 this afternoon, and really by the time the sun comes up in the morning and you've got light that's available for taking photographs, about 9 o'clock, and then the light will then start to begin to fade around about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So what I'll do is I'll just show you exactly where I positioned the chair hide. So as I said, ideally you want your feeder station facing north, and that is actually north. So feeder station is here, got my posts and my perches, and I'm stood right behind my chair hide. There's a camera there, to try and maximise the amount of light. So direction is very important. Try and position your feeder station in the north with you sitting in the south to maximise the amount of light that you can for photography purposes. Okay, moving on to tip number 2, and tip number 2 is posts. And when I talk about posts, I mean posts and perches. Just to make the difference, a post is basically a place where you want a bird to land on before it then moves on to your perch, where it will start feeding. So what I'll do is I will walk around the feeder station and I'll show you the posts and the perches that I've set up and how I've set them up. Okay, as I said, tip number 2 is to do with posts. You want to try and keep them to a minimum. You don't want too many. Again, you've got to think about the target species that you're after, and what we'll do is we'll walk around my posts, and remembering that I'm targeting woodpeckers and jays, and I'll show you some photographs that I've taken on these posts and perches here. Okay, this first one here is targeted specifically at woodpeckers. With my posts, what I do is I use, I'll just bring this down here if you can see it, is a temporary fencing post or a spike, metal spike. What I do is I knock that into the ground, and then I use cable ties to actually attach the perch onto it. So the idea being that the woodpecker will come down onto the post and work its way up, and I should get a good chance of getting a photograph. So how do I know what position I'll get it in? Well, if we look here, on the top of this perch here, running down the centre, you'll see that there is a crease, and in that crease I've put some suet pellets. So the idea being that the bird comes down onto the post, works its way up and starts feeding on the suet pellets, and that then means that from my hide that the bird is square onto me and I can get a good photograph. What I have here is a post. The idea being, what I'm looking for is either the woodpecker or a jay to come down onto this substantial post. I'm not looking for small birds on here, so you need a substantial post for the species that you're after. They'll come down onto the post and then down onto the perch to feed. And what I have here is my main post where I want the birds to come down and feed. It's just sitting on a small table. The idea being that I'll spread this with peanuts and the jays will come down onto the high cover. Once they feel safe, they'll then drop down onto this post and feed on the peanuts. I then have my final perch. Again, this is aimed mainly at woodpeckers, and again what I've done, as you'll see here, is running down the side. I've put some suet pellets in, the idea being that the woodpecker will be on the side of the perch or along the arm, and I'll get the photograph. So what I'll do now is I'll just show you some photographs that I've taken of birds on these posts and perches. Here we have a female great spotted woodpecker. It's come straight down onto this feeder 5 minutes after I stopped filming for the video. So yeah, female great spotted woodpecker. Beautiful bird. And if I just slide the camera around, you'll see the male spotted woodpecker on the feeder. So I've got two woodpeckers down at the same time. I've got the male, as you can see the red patch in the back of his head, that identifies it as a male, on the feeder. Come back across to the post and we've got the female. She's now sitting down here, and you can see the reason for putting the suet pellets down the side, so that you get the bird on at a right angle and you can get a good film of it and a good shot. The black band you see there is the strap to hold the post to the spike, but if you get the bird down here, I'll show you some photographs so you can get some good pictures. So that's great, both the male and the female great spotted woodpecker at the same time. Brilliant. Okay, tip number one for setting up a bird feeder station is all to do about the background. One lesson that I've learned in bird photography and indeed wildlife photography is that the background of your picture is as important as the subject itself. If you can get the background correct and your subject is sharp, you'll have a great image. So how do you go about getting a good background? What I'll do now is I'll put up a slide and I'll explain to you how to go about trying to get as good a clear background as you possibly can. So what we're looking at is in this slide is that where the photographer stands, the distance between him and the subject, and the distance between the subject and the background is such that the distance between the subject and the background is twice that of the distance between the photographer and the subject. That's the minimum basic idea that you're looking for to try and get a good clean background. Other things that will help you to do that is to photograph with as wide an aperture as possible, and that way you should blur out the background. You're looking to get things like nice blurry background with some bokeh in it, or a nice creamy background, and I'll show you some examples of what I mean by that. So the background is as important as the subject itself. Tip number one. Okay, what I'd like to do now is just to finish off is to leave you with what I consider to be some of my top 10 images that I've taken of birds at feeder stations. I hope you enjoy them. Okay, just to summarise the top 5 tips. At number 5 was recce. As I said, don't think you can just come in anywhere and set up and the birds are going to come in. You need to spend a little bit of time doing a little recce to try and find out where the birds are, especially if you're targeting specific birds. Tip number 4 was location. With regards to the location, you're looking for cover for the birds to come into that's going to make them feel safe before they then come down onto your post to start feeding, and you get an opportunity to get the photographs that you're after. Tip number 3 was direction. What we're looking at there is that having your feeder station in the north with you sat in your hide in the south, thereby maximising the amount of sunlight that you're going to get during the day. Tip number 2 was to do with posts and perches. Keep them to a minimum, and again, if you're targeting specific birds, then you're going to have to look at the type of post or perch that you're going to use so you can get the maximum out of it. And then finally, tip number 1 is to do with background. You need to get that separation between the bird and the background and the distance to you so that you can try blur out the background as much as you can. Okay, thanks for watching Kevin Hatley Photography and my top 5 tips on how to set up a bird feeder station. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have doing it. And this has been a long-term project. It's not something that's done in a matter of days, it's a matter of weeks. I've been on this for over a month now. All I would ask is that if you've liked this, could I ask you to hit the like button. Also, if you've not subscribed to my channel, Kevin Hatley Photography, could I ask you to consider doing so? It's completely free, it doesn't cost you anything, and it just helps me to give me that little bit more incentive to keep coming out here into the beautiful English countryside to photograph wildlife and nature. So, until the next time, stay safe, take care, and I hope to see you soon. Bye for now.